Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a new show we're launching here on the Rangers Review. With me, Derek Clark. Alongside me is Joshua Barry and Jonny McFarlane. I think we're calling this the OGs, but we're open to suggestions for the title of this new show. We aim to bring it to you in a bi-weekly sort of format. So 1 week you'll get the talking point with Chris and Stevie, and then the other week myself, Joshua and Jonny will talk all things Rangers and maybe a little bit in between as well. First of all, lads, how are we doing, Joshua?
I am fine, not as well as Jonny, who is drinking a beer that's more expensive than you or I can afford, Derek. But no, I'm fine. Fine. That. I feel this week has been going on honestly for about 3, so I'm just happy to reach.
It's been an interesting week. There's no doubt about that.
It's dragged in. You're fully deserving of said beer tonight, Jonny. Can you enlighten the viewers as to what you're drinking
tonight? It's a
tonight?
verdant root beer. It's one of these what other people would call blanky craft beers, which I love. And it's a fruity IPA. I think New England IPA is the style.
Wow.
With Citra hops. It's good.
What's the percentage on that?
6.5. So if by the end of this I'm a blithering idiot, you know what it is.
Right, let's crack on. Of course, it's Valentine's Day today. You guys doing some Valentine's activities tonight? Keep it clean.
I am. Well, I've still got work to do after this, so presuming I finish on time. Yeah, we dinner, Derek. What about you? Can't go wrong with that.
Well, interestingly, I was instructed to get flowers from there's a local florist, literally about half a mile up the road from me, and I was organised this year, so I bought them online, picked them up earlier, went in to pick them up earlier, and literally there was a queue about 6 guys in front of me who hadn't pre-ordered, and they were flapping around hoping to buy bouquets, but I think they're pretty much onto plums because every man and their dog are in florists up and down the country. Jonny, are you one of those guys?
No. Listen, me and my wife were talking about this last night. It's actually our 20th Valentine's Day as a couple. So that shows you how long she's been putting up with my nonsense. So listen, we've got a 3-year-old running about. You know, those days are long gone. You two are still lucky enough to just have the nice evening with your partner, maybe go out for a nice meal. We'll be trying to put her to bed at probably 10:30 with her going, no, more stories. No, Peppa Pig needs to go on. Come on. So, yeah, maybe we might get an episode of Succession or something like that at about 11:15, and that would be a fantastic Valentine's Day if we get that in. So that's about as much as it gets. But I did get a card, Derek. I did get a card, and those will get opened later on. But no more than that. Valentine's Day, you know, at my age, you've done it, you've liked it, you've loved it, and there's other priorities.
Well, we're staying in. We're having a steak dinner tonight, but we've started watching. This is directed at you, John. We've started watching. I'm a bit behind the curve on this one, but we've started watching Peaky Blinders. So
great show!
Yep. So
I love that. Why is that directed at you? That's like my favorite show of all time. And
you watched that as well, Joshua?
I have no pop culture chat, so it feels good to be included.
I can confirm.
I love Peaky Blinders. Yeah, I like that, and I've also just watched a bit controversial, but Ted Lasso. You watched that?
Yeah, not a fan of Ted Lasso, guys, at all. Nah. Sorry, I know the comments are going to go wild here, but for me,
it's just so wholesome. He's a lovely guy.
Yeah,
that's all I want in my television.
It's for brain deads. That's the problem. I mean, there's no nuance whatsoever. There's absolutely no bite to it. There's no satirical element. Man. It's just it's for people who spend their entire lives on their iPhones, plinking and plonking on TikTok and all that. Just
plinking and plonking.
Excellent. Well, I don't have TikTok, but I like Ted. So there you go.
Right, I'll put it on the to watch list. See if we get around to it.
I'm being deliberately confrontational. I quite liked the first season of Ted Lasso, but I thought second season it started to go downhill, and by the third season, I watched the first 2 or 3 episodes. I was just like, get this off. This is garbage. So
What about Peaky Blinders? Do you like Peaky Blinders?
I liked Peaky Blinders. I wouldn't go mad. It's not The Wire. It's not Sopranos. It's not Mad Men, but it's good.
Not seen any of them, so there you go.
I don't think I've seen any of them either, to be honest. But there you go. Johnny is going ballistic there.
These guys spend too much time watching football, but I can't really complain about that. So I'm just going to keep quiet.
Yeah, I'm not an avid TV watcher, but yeah, Peaky Blinders is getting played furiously in the Clark household at the moment. So that is what we're watching on this lovely Valentine's evening. But people are tuning in. They want to hear about, well, I was going to say they want to hear about Rangers. I'm not entirely sure they do want to hear about Rangers. But there you go. It was press conference day today. Joshua, you were at the Rangers Training Centre. It was a bit delayed. Philip Clement this afternoon. We heard from both he and Yanis Hadji again ahead of the game against Hearts. How was it?
How was it? It was, yeah. Well, the fact it was late was somewhat fitting for Rangers. There wasn't too much kind of unexpected. Clement is someone who I think really believes in himself and is clearly a very hard worker. He's a very respectful guy. You have an element of always have an element of sympathy, I think, for a manager when they're under so much pressure. But equally, he's someone who has been given more patience as a Rangers manager than anyone in a long, long time, and has survived results that his predecessors just haven't. He's a man under pressure. I thought today's press conference reflected that a little bit more. I don't know what you guys thought watching it. He was pushed on a lot of different details. Talks with Patrick Stewart, they've taken place, but have they specifically been about his future? No. Did he still believe he had the 200% backing from the club, which was a line he used a few weeks ago? He said he had no reason, no indication to believe that had changed. The thing is, Derek, and Yanis Hadji kind of admitted this in his answer, Rangers could go to Hearts, and I know we'll speak a little bit about this game. Rangers could go to Hearts and win 3-0 and put in one of their best away performances of the season, and it would, at the moment, be met with a collective shrug of the shoulders.
Yeah.
That is the position that they're in, and for the majority, I think you'd have to say, Clement is gone past that point of no return. Not in the eyes of Patrick Stewart at the moment, the Rangers CEO. So yeah, it was, I would say, largely as expected press conference.
Yeah, you put an interesting clip of him answering a question at the end of the press conference on Twitter, Johnny. The two previous clips we've put out of Clement and Hadji is what the kids call being ratioed, I think. And what we're seeing now is that a host of comments on the videos and not many likes. I think that sort of sums up the mood amongst the fan base at this moment in time. They're just sick of hearing words. They want to see action on the pitch.
Yeah, but at the same time, obviously, the manager's going to speak. So it's always difficult when you get to a stage where basically the manager's just not being able to get any traction because the fans are so aggressively against the idea of him managing the club. But I thought today, to be honest, against what I thought was a pretty hostile press pack who interrogated him pretty well, and that's something that I think people over the years have criticised, kind of the cosy nature of Scottish sports journalism. I thought today, if you look at that, Clement really did get a tough time of it. I thought people drilled into a lot of detail and pushed him, and he didn't particularly look like he was enjoying himself, that's for sure. But I thought from a media-trained point of view, from a sort of media perspective, I thought he handled it pretty well. He is a good communicator in the media for the majority of the time. I think occasionally he comes out with something a bit unusual or a bit that makes you double take. Yes. But overall, I think he comes across reasonably well, and maybe other people will disagree with me on that. I'm quite sure they will. Probably comments setting on fire by that, but that's my take. And I've sat across from him many a time, and the one thing I would say about him, Derek, on that front, I don't know if you boys agree with this, but I thought, see, when he arrived to the point that they had the famous loss up at Ross County, he was immaculate in his press dealings. He didn't even put a foot wrong. It was like the minute the pressure came on him, then you started to see press conference after press conference where you just felt it wasn't quite nailed on. You've always got to remember the foreign manager. It's not his first language. So that needs to be taken into account.
Yeah, there was a moment after the Aris game where he said something sort of untoward, and I was like, oof, that's a bit weird. I think he talked about Rangers getting through in Europe or something like that, but it had it all going, really? But that aside, I get your point, very, very little sort of...
We're talking big picture here, Derek. I know people want to zero in on, well, he said this and he said that, and I don't refute that there's been a few ones where you would sort of go, right, really? But he is from Belgium. He doesn't know the cultural nuance of Scotland. And I'm talking big picture. The problem with Philippe Clement is actually, it's not really his press conferences. It's not really anything to do with how he carries himself. I think overall, he's been pretty good in that regard. The problem is, as we've said many, many times, is the way he sets up his team for these domestic games. And until that changes, and I don't think it will change, then Philippe Clement's always going to be a hiding to nothing, because when things are going well on the pitch, people give you the benefit of the doubt when you don't quite get things right off the pitch. But when things are going badly, every little single thing gets picked up. Perfect example of that is at Rangers. There can be brilliant things going on off the pitch. They can be moved strides forward with the women's team, strides forward with the way the youths are handled at Murray Park, blah, 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 blah. The minute the men's team isn't performing, none of that matters a jot to your average fan. And that's the cold, hard reality of how football works in this country.
I totally agree with that. A lot of supporters a bit perplexed as to why he's still in a job, Joshua. We've seen the minutes of Patrick Stewart's meeting with the Fan Advisory Board last week, in which he said it would not be a financial thing to sack Philippe Clement. It's not financially driven, and this was before, of course, a defeat to Queen's Park. He was quizzed a number of times, Clement, about meetings with Patrick Stewart after the game on Sunday. And he says he spoke to him like he does every game. And he just says he was frustrated, devastated at the loss. But there's a lot of good things that they have done in recent weeks, which I see some supporters on social media saying he just doesn't get it. He doesn't get the magnitude of that defeat. Why hasn't Patrick Stewart come out and pulled the trigger, do you think?
I thought you were going to say, why hasn't he come out and spoken? And
that as well, yeah.
I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. I can understand why supporters want to hear from him, but if he gets into a habit of, he can't come out and give him a second vote of confidence, because that's, that just doesn't happen.
How many should give?
That's not even the dreaded vote of confidence. That's like I don't think there's a word for that.
Well, he bought himself some time with this review, didn't he? So
he bought himself time with the review. The difficulty is that people have just been waiting for so long for anything. It's been the rebuild, and then it's been a new rebuild. The manager comes in, this chairman, that chairman, this CEO. So people are just tired of waiting. People are tired of waiting for, or there's not much hope that time spent in the waiting periods will return good long-term results. I don't know if Clement quite has communicated the gravitas of that result, because you can come out and you can say it was a freak game. I don't think it really was. We can get into that, but this is systemic issues.
Well, it both was and it wasn't. It wasn't.
Yeah, but it's not like a game where you see if Rangers were right top of the league, or they were really hunting down Celtic, and then you can say it's a freak game. When you drop points consistently domestically, especially in games where you have a higher percentage of the ball, that's not a freak game. And you can come out and you can say anything about that result. Their goalkeeper played well. There was a penalty, but it doesn't matter. If you lost, it just does not matter. Nothing you can say makes that matter. Why is Patrick Stewart still sticking with Clement? I've no doubt that. I think if you're looking at that rationally as Patrick Stewart, you don't look at that game and think it's a freak result. Now, is he the best place? I think there's a question of, is he the best placed person to judge it? As the CEO, will the external review suggest that Rangers should still have a sporting director of football structure? I would hope so, because I think that any sensible football club has that, because ultimately who judges the manager? It should be someone with real football knowledge. And you can have too many cooks spoil the broth, but I think Rangers issues a lot of them can be zeroed back into who judges the managerial performance. And if that's not right, because so much of what happens at Rangers is flown from the manager, and that's started to change with recruitment in some other areas of the club. But because so much of it has flowed down from the manager, there's been an over-trusting of managers. There's not been adequate judgment of their performance. I just think that's a huge reason why Rangers are here. So why has he not pulled the trigger, Derek? I think because if you give someone till the end of the season, if it's not a caretaker, if it's a caretaker, are you resigning off European football compared to Clement's record? And if you bring someone else in, you give them a poison chalice and they've seen another Celtic treble. You need to think long term, whether people like it or not. I think because you could sack someone now and this time next year will be in the exact same position, having this exact same conversation. Equally, just doing the opposite thing of, we'll give this guy time. If there's not background work to appoint someone else come the summer, just giving someone time doesn't mean that you're going to get the opposite results of firing someone when they're 9 points behind. So I would think they're trying to get the strategies in place, the infrastructure to make next season a success. But it's a risk. It's a risk because if you keep Clement for this amount of time, we know what the fan sentiment is like. You risk real resignation because there's still a lot of football to be played between now and the end of the season. And you've got season tickets to sell. It's going to be a difficult 3 months to manage if this month has been difficult, if this week has been difficult for Rangers. Yeah,
Clement was asked about, of course, that video circulated of him leaving Ibrox after the Queen's Park game and the angry reaction to him walking out. And he sort of referenced Stuart Kettlewell leaving his job at Motherwell recently due to a bit of stick that he was getting as well, and about whether it crossed the line. You can go and watch what he had to say over on the YouTube channel, folks, in that press conference. But that is the sort of reaction that I think you can understand, whether it crossed the line or not, Johnny, with the remaining games coming up. I think the board...
I don't understand that, to be honest. I don't understand that. I don't understand someone that is so abusive to another human being. So I think that's completely wrong. And that's not something... No matter how frustrated I am personally with whatever I'm seeing in a football pitch, I'm not going to bring that into the real world and use language like that and aggression like that towards another human being. I think that's totally wrong. And I think the vast majority of people, while understanding that folk are upset, would say that was a guy that needed to calm himself down before he gives himself a coronary. And, that level of abuse is just not on. But the overall level of anger that there is out there, you can completely understand. And you know what, Derek? It's not just this season, is it? This has been building since Steven Gerrard left and all the things that have gone on since then. For me personally, the big cut-off point or the end of that successful period from Steven Gerrard walking in and rebuilding Rangers to the Europa League final. At that point, that's when Rangers should have made a massive, massive push to sell as many of those players as they possibly could and rebuild the team in the image of Giovanni van Bronckhorst. So easy for me to say that looking back, but I think we would all agree that there was a real line in the sand there that you need to kind of maximize the opportunity to sell those players that have taken you to such a defining moment. You didn't quite get over the line, but that would have allowed Giovanni van Bronckhorst the chance to build something up in his own image. That never came. The Michael Beale situation where Michael came in, he obviously was able to change things a little bit and bring in his own ideas, and it looked like in some ways he was moving forward in that first period. People kind of forget that Michael Beale, for his first half season or whatever, felt like he was moving it on, and with the changes that he was going to make in the summer, there was a lot of positivity and feeling that, you know, Celtic were going to be there for the taking, and that was actually correct with Brendan Rodgers coming back and the situation around Postecoglou leaving and Brendan not quite, I don't think quite, you know, feeling 100% right when he first came back to Celtic with the sort of slightly uneasy relationship that he had there. And you saw that when Clement came in after Beale was sacked. Rangers had a real opportunity and should have won the league. I think if Rangers had signed a striker that was capable of scoring at a good level rather than Fabio Silva, I think they would have won the league. I really, really do, looking back on it, Derek. I think that was the key point. I think Silva's a good player. He's shown that in La Liga this year, but I think he's been pretty impressive. And
yeah, it was not Scottish football, was he?
Exactly. There was times here that I thought he did good things. But, and I hate to go over old ground, but I think if you'd gone out and got Lawrence Shankland at that point, Rangers would have been title winners, and this would be a very, very different conversation we're probably having right now.
Yeah.
But that's what was needed. Someone who was a killer in the Premiership. Now, Lawrence Shankland's obviously had a really, really bad 6 months, 7 months, but there's a lot of factors behind that, and we've seen that before with a player going into their last year of their contract. But
Rangers in the summer.
Yeah, absolutely. But Rangers, for me, there was a line in the sand at that point, and that's when they should have made significant changes. But you can understand that from that point on, it's just been one disaster after another. You know, Beale, the signings, the promised rebuild, into Clement, into the collapse, into the rebuild, into Hampden, into this defeat now, 13 points behind Celtic. From that point, the Europa League, it's just been one calamity after another. And how many seasons of that is it now? Is it 2.5 seasons of just nothingness?
Almost 3 years since Seville.
Yeah,
and that's why I think there's so much anger. What's the legacy of that? Mismanagement. That's the legacy of it.
Yeah, and we all know that there's roots of that go back further, and decisions that haven't been perfect. But no football club gets everything right. You can't expect every transfer that comes in to work. You've got to aim for that 7 out of 10 ratio. If you do that, you'll be doing extremely well. But Rangers have just made too many bad decisions at too many times, at too many different levels of the club. There isn't enough kind of grey here in the key positions. I was talking to someone a couple of days ago about this. Rangers have made these changes with Fraser Thornton coming in, and obviously Patrick Stewart. And I've got a slightly different take on this from Joshua. I don't think Patrick Stewart and Fraser Thornton have been at all public enough. I think Rangers is a club that needs to be led from the front. It needs to be guys who are coming out and saying, we're doing this, we're doing that. Strong leadership. That's what I think people who follow this club want. That's what they've been used to traditionally. Listen, I hate to always hark back to the Souness era, the Smith era, the Murray era, and talk about what happened. But, in those days when Rangers had a bad result, you'd better believe that the key figures were out. They were talking about the plan. They were talking about setting it right and how they were going to do it. And for me, that's how the club needs to go going forward. It needs to be better at setting the agenda. And I know, listen, this comes from the very top. This is people will think that this is a criticism in the PR department. It's absolutely not. I think this comes from the top of the club, and wanting and understanding that this is a club that needs to be led.
I agree with that, Johnny, but I just think in isolation, this week, Patrick's just done that detailed debrief. I think you risk coming out this week, and if you start talking about while that review's going on,
I agree.
Moving forward,
in that context,
moving forward, there's been a complete vacuum. And don't get me wrong, I do not disagree with you about the vacuum of leadership and what I go back to at the start. The biggest issue Rangers have had, they've not had strong football executives over a long period of time. So in the last couple of years, there's been no one there to hold accountability for decisions, because whoever comes into the job, it was the last guy. I'm doing a review about the last guy's job that he did. That is a fundamental issue. So I totally agree. You need to be visible. It needs to be led from the front. It needs strong ideas. I just think in isolation of that, if he'd come out this week and said, "Look, here's all the things we're going to do," I think if you're Patrick Stewart and you're thinking forward at the moment, you think the next move I make needs to be the right one. But some people, well, I'm sure, be watching this and saying, "Well, he's already went down in people's estimations because he's not made that decision yet," and that is the risk he took when he spoke about what he thought was the right decision and not the popular one. I don't think he meant it was just backing Clement. I think he meant that sacking a manager and bringing someone else in is going to make everything right. Because if you look, Rangers have had a real bad habit the last 2 managerial appointments in particular of saying that's the manager, that's the one who's going to make everything right. Academy ideas, recruitment, leadership, filling the void publicly, whether that be Beale's role in recruitment or Clement becoming a club spokesman for, again, decisions that he had no reign over in terms of the Copeland stand. Totally agree with you. You need strong leadership because there's been a huge vacuum for a long time.
Yeah, there's this sense that, I think from within the club that they don't want to add to the noise, which you can understand, but there's a balance, isn't there? I mean, Fraser Thornton has been the chairman for how long now? And he said 1 or 2 sentences publicly outside of his statement, that the statement that came from the club when he came in. I mean, I know that the chairman's not an executive chairman, and I know he's not the day-to-day running of the club. That's Patrick Stewart, but I still think you want to get to know this person. Who is this man? No one really knows outside of.
Should you have done a press conference
like people who've worked with him in the past?
When John Gilligan came in, do you think you should have done a press conference like that?
Yeah, of course, absolutely. I think he should have, and introduced himself to the fans and let them know what sort of a guy is running the club, and what his vision and his role is, and what his role is specifically in this new setup. And I just think it speaks to this sense of they don't want to add anything to this giant swirling pool of noise, and that's a totally jumbled metaphor that I'd probably look at in Josh's copy and phone him up and give him a hard time over. But this is live, so forget it. But the point I'm trying to make is when I get there eventually, I just think it needs to be a bit more proactive from the guys at the very top of the club. That's to me core. It's core to what's needed. It needs to be seen that they have got the reins and got them firmly, even if they're not always right. That they're making strong decisions. In any business, you need a leader to make strong decisions. Sometimes they're wrong, and you course correct. And that even the best leaders do that. So, but, I just feel like that there's almost like a tentativeness about doing that, and I think it's really wrong. I think if you do that correct, it would help you in times of tumult, in times of the ship getting buffeted by storms.
Yeah, I get you. I'm conscious of the time, so before we wrap up, we'll try and keep it to about half an hour. Joshua, the team for Tynecastle, do you expect many changes from last weekend? Just off the top of my head, I'd imagine Butland comes back in. Enciala would be starting, and just trying to think who else is there. I'd want to see Egaman up front.
Well, I've gone for a. Do you want to tell me? Do you want me to tell you my 11, Derek?
Yes, please. Yeah.
Right. So I've gone for Butland.
Yep.
I'm dropping Yefty. I'm putting Yilmaz in at left back because I think you cannot accept that level of defending, and you need to make a point to a young player like that it needs to be better. And if it's not better, there's consequences. I think.
Fair point.
I've said here many times that I rate Yefty, but I would make a strong point. I think at the back, I'd like to see Fernandez given a chance.
Okay.
I'd like to see him in.
Agreed. Agreed.
With Suter,
yeah. Right back, Tavernier, Raskin and Dio in the midfield, obviously. I think because Hearts are the form team in the Scottish Premiership at the moment, they've got the same results as Celtic and Rangers have in the last 5 games in the league. So I'd probably go Bajrami in the number 10 role, even though he's not been good. I think in these type of games, he does the hard graft. So that's a game where I would be more inclined to trust him. And then I'm going Egaman, and Dessers with Egaman off the left, and then Cherny on the right, who just picks himself, obviously.
Right, okay. Egaman's would be another one that's sort of been off the boil, Joshua. Would you go along with Johnny's team? Are you making any other changes to that? I mean, Bayrami's another one that's been poor, isn't he?
Yeah. It's difficult because
I mean, there's Hadji.
Yeah. Hadji would play. I think you need. I think you need two of your strikers in that team, but I don't think Dessers and Egaman works together that well. Egaman and Danilo works together well because Danilo is the deeper player, whereas Egaman and Dessers, Egaman's a deeper player, and Egaman's not great at that. You shouldn't be passing the ball 40 times a game, he should be 10, 15 times a game. So I don't think his performance, I don't place that much blame on him because I just think he's getting the ball in unfamiliar and surroundings all the time. And I would go, I don't think it'll be Fernandez and Suter because neither of those players are comfortable on the left. So I suspect, I think Big Clinton. You get your Clinton start at Tynecastle, which you called. You can say you called it first, yeah. I think it'll probably be Chefty. You both know I've been a fan of Ridvan in the past, but I just think.
I think Rangers need to bring a left back in the summer.
Yeah, I would. Yeah, I'd maybe look to move Ridvan on, keep Chefty for one more year, and I wouldn't be opposed to keeping Robbie Fraser probably maybe a second. I think that's a big shout, but I think there's an opportunity of that happening. Tav obviously starts right back. Diamande and Raskin. Clement speaks about Bailey Rice in the second half of the press conference. I thought it was harsh for him to be taken off at halftime, but it's definitely going to be Diamande and Raskin in those two roles. Connor Barron's still injured.
Maybe I'll change my mind and put Haji in actually ahead of Barami. Okay. You know, now that you've kind of
it's my turn. It's my turn. I've not even got to my attacking midfielders.
Yeah, I know, but I'm anticipating, and I think you're right.
Okay. Well, I was actually gonna say, are we going off what we want? This is the thing with predicted teams. Is it what we want or what we predict, Derek? You set the rules.
Well, what you would like to see. I always get pelted.
Yeah, that's what I go with.
What you would like to see.
Yeah.
Come on then, Josh. Tell us what you think. Sorry. If we're talking about what we'd like to see, I wouldn't mind seeing Haji in that number 10 position, but I don't think Clement will do it because he's just not so far. So if you're talking about on the basis of performance, does Bayrami merit a start? I don't think he does. No. I think Clement probably will start him there. But what I would like to see would be Haji there, Egeman at number 9, Cherney on the right, and who plays on the left? I mean, if it was me, I'd maybe play Finlay Curtis. I mean, why not? Like, why not? But what is the? You could say yes, it's a big game and there's a pressure to win. It's always going to be the case.
Throw him in, see what happens.
Yeah, I mean,
it's one of the toughest games in Scottish football, that though, isn't it?
At the end of the day, it's a dead rubber. Let's be honest about it. You should be experimenting.
Realistically, Derek, I think it'll be Egeman up top, Bayrami number 10, Haji left, Cherney right, which is the front four that worked well against Hibs. I think if Neil Critchley's clearly a smart manager. Hearts are in a good vein of form. I think if you're smart and you're a Hearts team this weekend, you don't go after the game. You sit off the game a little bit. That might frustrate the crowd a little bit, but look at that Hibs game, an encapsulation of all Rangers' issues. When Hibs go for it, when they tried to press and they tried to jump up, Rangers had space to play into. Hibs literally got back into the game by giving Rangers the ball, and mistakes followed. So I think Critchley, and I would expect that while you'll see a quite full-blooded Hearts performance, I think you'll see Hearts sit off a little bit. Ask the question of Rangers, can you dictate the game with the ball? The answer will most likely be no. And that will make it a really difficult afternoon. Now, for Rangers, it's definitely a better outcome if Hearts are aggressive from the first whistle.
I think Critchley will still be debating this with his coaching staff because there will be a sense that go and get them the Tynecastle beer pit. They're wounded after the Queen's Park game. Let's go and get a goal up in the first 10 minutes and then we'll do it. And I think they'll be debating that closely. But I totally agree with you, Josh. I think the right decision for him, having watched so much of Rangers, and I don't know if Neil Critchley will watch every Rangers game. I'm sure he will have analysts who do that. But I would say that the best thing the Hearts could do is just sit off the game and look to maximise counter-attacks and set pieces. And if they do that, they've got a real chance of getting something.
The defensive set pieces since Christmas for Rangers. I think it's 6-7 goals they've conceded, and there's been so much like chaos going on that you kind of forget this. Normally it's something we'd do an article on at some point, but defensive set pieces, that's obviously where Queens get the goal from, and it's that shot. So often Rangers heavily load their zonal marking, and then they concede a free shot at the edge of the box. It happened in the League Cup final. So yes, brimming with expectation for this one, Derek. It's going to be great.
Say that again. I'll say it again. I've said it 1 zillion times. Get zonal marking in the bin. But what do I know? Anyway,
Josh, just before we go on that, right? The zonal marking thing. Why? Because it's hard for guys who are old farts like me and Derek, right? Because when we were kids, and I don't know. Listen, you can tell me, Josh, when you were a kid, if this was the case. But when we were kids, it was drummed into us. Man marking, you're on your man. Don't
lose them.
Yeah, if you lose them, it's your fault. So that's everyone who played boys football in Scotland up to the 2010 or whatever. That was what was drilled into you. Like, it was really an important thing. So this idea of zonal marking, I think, is difficult for people of a certain age who played football at a youth level to kind of get their head around, because you're like, yeah, okay, it's maybe better from an attacking point of view, but surely you just deal with the danger. So what's your feeling on zonal marking at corners? Why do you think they do it? Because every elite manager does it. So there's clearly really interesting, deep, strategic thought about why they do it. And you're our tactics guru, so put me and Derek right.
I would say man marking is easier to manipulate. It's easier to block players. It's easier, therefore, because of the unpredictability of what the opposition are going to do, to take responsibility for your zone as opposed to your man. In theory, it allows your strongest headers of the ball to stay in the areas you want them to, whereas
the major danger areas.
Yeah, let's say Rangers have, let's say Liam Balogun is their strongest defensive header of the ball. Actually, for the first 16 games of the season, Rangers didn't concede a goal from defensive set pieces. Their zonal setup hadn't changed that much from the season before. I think their issue has been when you take a dominant header of the ball out of that setup. And if you look at the team that played at the weekend, I think Fernandez will be quite good in the air. Believe he maybe had come off by the point that goal came in, but they've not. Robin Proper's not really aerially dominant. I think Nsiala, that's not going to be the best part of his game. Aside from that, who is really good in the air for Rangers? I mean, in the opposition box, it's been Nico Raskin. So I would say it's about there's more of a focus on protecting key zones. Zonal marking is less easy to manipulate, and by that I mean taking your best headers out of the area. And man marking still will happen sometimes to a degree, but generally what you'll have is a zonal marking system, and then you'll have blockers to try and disrupt runs, which is why sometimes you'll see like a tiny little player go up against a big player when it doesn't work well, and it looks like he's marking him when in effect he's just trying to disrupt his run. But teams are generally trying to hit in-swingers. They're trying to hit the front post. So in all honesty, it's not something I've thought a ton about, but I would say it's less easy to manipulate, keeps your strongest headers of the ball in certain areas, and rather than constantly reacting to the opposition, because there's so much, or should be so much set piece variation, I don't think there's enough at Rangers. That gives you a better structure to work out of. And Hearts actually do an interesting thing where they take Rangers do this a bit as well. They take all their players back from defensive set pieces, which again is something that in the past you'd say you've got to keep someone up to get the ball up there. But that's just something that a lot of coaches do now as well. So
pioneered by a certain Mr. Alistair McCoist in his time as Rangers manager.
Was it?
Do that and drive everyone mad. But that's going back a little bit. Yeah,
Mark Warburton used to leave like 3 players up, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he was no messing in the short corners constantly as well, because as we know, and someone was asking this question on the YouTube channel the other day, when I was mentioning that Rangers had 16 corners against Queen's Park, he was saying basically, do you know how many corners are successful? And the answer is, I think it's something like 2.8%. So yes, I get that. They are not a perfect way to score by any means, but you want to find ways to use that ability to keep possession in a dangerous area to your advantage. And whether or not the ball is thrown into the box and you're hoping for a scramble or a header or whatever. Interestingly, just on a side note, just regarding dominant players in the box, we had a lot of chat about Niko Katic.
I was going to bring him up, Johnny. I'm glad you did.
Interesting to see he's absolutely ripping up the championship at the moment, scoring goals, man of the match against Liverpool, would have been available for peanuts.
Interesting is I've seen him reference Rangers a couple of times. I know Plymouth done a little promo about the team he supports, getting to know Niko a bit more, and he said that he supports Rangers, which is quite something coming from a guy who grew up over in Croatia. Loves the club, wanted to come back, of course, and Rangers looked elsewhere. I think that is looking back, they should have been all over that for me. I think he would do a job. We spoke about it, remember, after the Tannadice Dundee United game about getting an aerially dominant centre-back in. I don't think they've addressed it. Jury's out, of course, on Fernandez. We've only seen a little snippet of him, but for me, yeah, they've been all over Katic. The thing is, with that loan, it's not an obligation to buy or an option to buy, although the Plymouth fans have fallen in love with him already, and they'll be looking to do a deal. I'd imagine if I'm Rangers, I'm contacting Zurich in the summer and thrashing out a deal. Would you agree with that, Johnny?
Well, I think it's one of those ones that just comes into the category of you need players who understand the league and who can perform in the league. And I know it's one of those old cliches, but I think Nikola Katic, he's not the perfect player, but I think the weird scenarios that Rangers face, from ball dominant to hitting on the counter-attack in Europe and against Celtic, I think you need specialists in your squad. To me, Nikola Katic would be a specialist you could bring in for a low value, on a low wage.
A Balogun replacement, if you like.
Exactly. And loves the club, knows the club, understands the league. Yeah. It's just one of those ones that to me is a bit of a no-brainer. But I do get that the club are attempting to be a lot more sensible about the overall approach. And I think Nikola Katic is now 28, 29.
Yeah,
tell me if I'm wrong.
But yeah,
and there may be the feeling that they just don't want to go down that road. They want to get in players that they're able to resell and players they're able to develop. And they may think Fernandes is a guy, given his age, given his profile as a Portugal under-21 international, they can get for a very reasonable fee. He can come in and be a much more complete player than Nikola Katic, because by all accounts, he's, I think, would be more comfortable on the ball. He's got that ability to play the high line as well as be aerially dominant. Now, we've not had any evidence from that, but that's what the scouting team, I think, have thought when they've gone out and suggested that he's the one they should go and get. So we need to see him in action. It might well be that in a month's time that we're all going, can you believe this guy? Now, remember, everyone in their ante was saying, Egaman, oh my God, what are they doing? Why did they waste all that money on him? And then he explodes and everyone goes, wow, geez, Niels Coppin, clap, 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 phenomenal, wonderful, etc., etc. And it may be the same with this guy. It may be the same.
Joshua, before we wrap up, Katic, yes or no?
No. And I, like everyone else, like him, and he's good in the air, but I just think people have such a romantic view of players who used to play football clubs, and I don't think he.
I think what he's doing down south sort of goes against that.
But he's playing in a back three of a team who have what Plymouth average? They're bottom of the. I know they've had a fantastic.
They're playing some good stuff at the moment. They're sort of revived under that new manager. But
I think like what Balogun has is he's got qualities in the ball and cleverer. Is that a word? More intelligent football people than me. Much more intelligent football people than me judged that Katic, while he had those qualities which are obvious under Giovanni Van Bronckhorst's time, that he did not have what they wanted on the ball to remain. So I think Johnny's right. Go and look at new players. Go to new markets. Rangers are not the reason Rangers have not won the league is not because they don't have a defender who can head the ball. I don't believe that at all. I think the reason Rangers have not won the league is because their squad hasn't been technically proficient enough and they haven't been good enough at breaking down opposition low blocks. I don't think Katic solves that issue for you. That was my tuppence.
And that's never been an issue in Europe as well. That's the other thing. Rangers have never kind of felt like a team that have been under enormous pressure in Europe in terms of balls coming in. It's the occasional spinning ball in a domestic game. So I kind of understand that point of view. I still think there's certain games in Scotland, to argue back to you, Josh, Aberdeen away, Hearts away, Hibs away,
Celtic away,
to some extent Celtic, Kilmarnock, where just having one of your centre halves be a kind of an aggressor. Let
me put it back to it. Carter Vickers is a really good defender. He can be a siege defender, really aggressive. But how many of the last 5 years have Rangers won the league? Once. Celtic won the other 4 times. How many of those other 4 times have Celtic won the league, and at the end it's because of a big siege defender at Pittodrie or backs to the wall performances at Easter Road and Rugby Park? It's not. It's not close to that. It's because they are a team who have had a better manager for the style of play that wins in Scotland. And Rangers have at the moment quite a direct attritional style that in theory should work at these grounds. In theory, it should be right. You go to Tynecastle, and instead at the start of Clemont's time, go to Tynecastle. You don't. I remember the game Clement won 1-0. Sima scored. It was like 3 months in, And there's a piece that we wrote at the time. And at the end, it said, look, because Clement said after we played a lot of long balls, we ought to go over their press. I'm paraphrasing. And the piece said at the time, this is basically great here and now, but like long term, like you need to have more than that. You need to, because teams will work that out. It's 18 of 20 in his first league games, 20 of 35 since. Rangers have had direct styles. They've had physicality. I don't think that is the margin they need to make up to win the league. But that's only my opinion.
Interesting.
No, I think that's a very cogent argument.
Cogent? What does that mean? New word.
It makes sense.
I gotta write that down.
Yeah, you do that. You're always
say
saying
that
to all of these big words for you, Josh.
Yeah, I just say them to my dad in a phone conversation to impress
him. It's a good argument, and I can see it. And I remember being an onlooker at some of these Rangers games where you had Katic at the back and just wasn't moving the ball out quick enough, and it's always looking for the guy to play the 5-yard pass to. And then when he's asked to make that long pass, if he needs to, because he's pressed, then the ball goes out the pitch. And I get that on ball, he's got a bit to do, or certainly had to do when he was back at the club a few years ago. But I still think at Rangers, you need a big squad. You need players that can go over the distance of 65 games a season. And the more that you have that can cope, that you know are nailed on to be able to cope with the 38 domestic games, the better. And you look at this Rangers squad, and I get they want it to be tight and competitive, and everyone's fighting for a spot, and everyone feels like they're in contention. I think part of the reason is there's a bit of a dearth of quality after Rangers' first 11 or first 13 or something like that. I think after that, you're starting to talk about who do you play, and especially in key areas in the spine of the team, especially at centre half. I mean, I look at those central defenders. We don't know about Fernandes. We've already talked about that. Proper, I've said before and I'll say it again, I don't think he's a bad player. I think if I was coaching a team in Holland, I would think he's quite a good player. I don't think he's suited to Scottish football. You look at Leon Balogun, he's 36, phenomenal player. You wish you'd got him when he was 25. Surprised that, to be honest, given his pace, that he wasn't at better clubs prior to Rangers. I think you look at him and you think you must have been a real good player when you were 22, 23, 24. But maybe he's a guy that came on later in his career. But now, he's at the fag end of his career. And John Souttar, I think he's been one of Rangers' better players this season. I think most people would agree that when he wasn't injured. But is he any better than Connor Goldson? People chase Connor Goldson out, wanted him chased out. I certainly think Connor Goldson at his best is better than John Souttar. So you're talking about a club that had Richard Gough, had John Brown, had Dave McPherson, Davy Weir, Bugera. I mean, there's so many good Rangers defenders over the years. Queller, there's been tons of them. And I think they're a bit weak in there. And that's something that they'll need to look at in the months and years ahead. Because unless you're really strong at centre-back, and Joshua pointed out earlier, Cameron Carter-Vickers is by far the best central defender in Scotland. It's not even close. He's miles ahead. And that's the foundation that you build everything on, that strong defence. And that's always been the Rangers' way. Rangers have always been a club that put a premium on hard work, on defensive nous. I mean, the greatest player of all time, the greatest Rangers player is John Gregg. It's not Brian Laudrup or Paul Gascoigne or Ali McCoist. It's John Gregg. So that tells you a little bit about the character of the club, about what's required here. And there's a big thing about rolling your sleeves up and doing the dirty work at Rangers. So that's something I think Philippe Clement, if he's going to be around for the long term, needs to look at. Now, maybe this is anachronistic. Maybe football's changed. But I still think that with a Scottish core, Rangers can have those elements of their character within the club, within the team, and be modern and be a thoughtful football team.
Valid points.
Josh has got his head tilted to the side.
I'm just thinking I've still got work to do, and I've got Valentine's Day.
We've we've overrun by about 20 minutes here, but
I'm going to stop talking now.
Quality chat as ever. So we'll wrap up there. That was our first OGs show, folks. If you're watching this on Saturday morning, it's it's aired to our Rangers Review Extra members. First of all, if you want to join us and be a member, you get exclusive content like this before anyone else. You also get a Q&A show every week and also a press conference reaction video, as well as tactical shows. And as I touched on at the start of this show, the Talking Point with Chris and Stevie every fortnight. So you can sign up, head over to the Rangers Review YouTube channel homepage, click join, £2.99 a month. If you are watching on Saturday, you're not a subscriber, as Johnny's flashed up the banner there that is partially hiding his face. You can subscribe to the channel for absolutely nothing. So yeah, make sure you do just that. Hit the notification bell and you'll never miss a video when we go live. Right, we'll wrap up there. Big thanks to Joshua and to Johnny for joining us on this debut show, and we'll speak to you in a couple of weeks. Until then, of course, we'll have all the coverage for you from Tynecastle over the weekend. Enjoy your weekend, and we'll speak to you later on. Bye for now.